April 30th, 1943. The frigid waters off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague watches as the corpse of Major William Martin slides from the metal container of British submarine HMS Seraph into the dark Mediterranean waters. The dead man's skin has a bluish pallor in the moonlight. His waterlogged uniform clings to his frame as the gentle current takes him. Attached to his wrist with a chain, a briefcase containing what Adolf Hitler would soon believe were the Allies' most closely guarded secrets. Operation Mincemeat, perhaps the most audacious deception in military history, has begun. Almighty God, who guides the affairs of men, send this man on his journey, intones Lieutenant Norman Jewell, the submarine's commander. The small gathering of officers stands in solemn silence. None could know that this single corpse would save an estimated 40,000 Allied lives in the coming months. The body drifting toward the Spanish coastline was not Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. Just months earlier, he had been Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welsh laborer who died after ingesting rat poison containing phosphorus. Now, through an extraordinary transformation orchestrated by British intelligence, this anonymous man would become the linchpin in deceiving Hitler's entire high command. Charles Cholmondeley of MI5 and Ewan Montague of Naval Intelligence, the architects of this macabre deception, had meticulously crafted a false identity. They created an elaborate backstory. Love letters from a fictional fiancée named Pam, theater ticket stubs, bank statements, and most crucially, seemingly authentic military documents suggesting the Allies planned to invade Greece and Sardinia. Not Sicily, their actual target. As the corpse floats in the gentle Mediterranean current, Spanish fisherman José Antonio Rey Maria prepares his nets for the morning catch, unaware that his discovery hours later will set in motion one of history's greatest military deceptions. The Spanish authorities would find the body, and through their alliance with Nazi Germany, the documents would reach Hitler's intelligence services. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, would soon receive a report about these found documents. His analysis would reach the Führer's desk within days. The Germans intercepted approximately 90% of Allied Mediterranean communications during this period, yet this single corpse carrying falsified documents would upend their entire strategic assessment. As dawn breaks over the Spanish coast, the body of Major Martin continues its fateful journey toward shore. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill awaits news, having personally approved the operation with the words, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." The corpse that once belonged to a forgotten Welsh drifter now carries the hopes of the Allied war effort. The question hanging in the air as palpable as the salt spray: would Hitler believe the elaborate fiction floating toward the shores of neutral Spain? The answer would determine the fate of thousands of Allied soldiers poised for the invasion of Sicily, and potentially the outcome of the entire Mediterranean campaign. April 30th, 1943. The frigid waters off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Lieutenant Norman Jewell watches as his submarine, HMS Seraph, surfaces under the cover of darkness. On deck, a waterproof container holds what British intelligence has codenamed Major William Martin, a corpse dressed in the uniform of a Royal Marines officer. The body carries false documents suggesting the Allies plan to invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. The salt spray mists over the container as crewmen prepare for the most macabre deception of the war. In the balance hang the lives of thousands of Allied soldiers whose survival depends on convincing Hitler of a lie delivered by a dead man. Operation Mincemeat emerged from the desperate strategic landscape of early 1943. The Allies had finally gained momentum after years of devastating defeats. North Africa was nearly secured, and the next logical target was Sicily, the stepping stone to Italy. Yet Sicily was so obviously the next objective that Hitler had already reinforced the island with additional divisions. A frontal assault would result in a bloodbath reminiscent of Gallipoli in the previous war. In the subterranean corridors of British naval intelligence, at room 13 of the Admiralty Building in London, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague and Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley of MI5 conceived an audacious plan. Drawing inspiration from a memo written by Ian Fleming, later the creator of James Bond, they proposed creating a false identity for a corpse that would wash ashore in Spain carrying top-secret documents. The plan required meticulous attention to detail. The body itself came from Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welsh laborer who had died from ingesting rat poison. His lungs already contained fluid consistent with drowning. The naval pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury confirmed the body could pass as a drowning victim if delivered to Spanish waters within 3 days of being removed from refrigeration. Montague and Cholmondeley created an elaborate backstory for their fictional Major Martin. They obtained authentic identification, included personal letters, theater ticket stubs, and even a photograph of a fictional fiancée, actually an MI5 clerk named Jean Leslie. They added everyday items, keys, cigarettes, and stamps. Most critically, they included a letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff, to General Sir Harold Alexander in Tunisia, which casually mentioned the target is Sicily as a feint while identifying Greece and Sardinia as the actual invasion sites. The operation hinged on Spanish officials finding the body and sharing the documents with German intelligence. Spain, though officially neutral, maintained close ties with Nazi Germany. British intelligence knew that German agents operated freely in Spain and had established relationships with Spanish officials. As HMS Seraph slipped through the Mediterranean darkness, carrying its grim cargo toward the Spanish coast, Montague and Cholmondeley waited anxiously in London. The deception represented the pinnacle of British intelligence craft, a web of truths, half-truths, and outright fabrications so convincing it might just fool the most paranoid intelligence apparatus in history. The corpse that would deceive Hitler was about to begin its mission. April 30th, 1943. The cold waters off Huelva, Spain. The body of Major William Martin, Royal Marines, drifts gently toward shore. His waterlogged uniform clings to his frame. His briefcase, chained to his wrist, contains secrets that could alter the course of the war. The fisherman who discovers the corpse has no idea he has just become an unwitting pawn in one of the most audacious deception operations in military history. The Spanish authorities recover the body. Lieutenant General Claudio Sanchez Garcia, head of the Spanish General Staff, is immediately notified. Within hours, German intelligence in Spain becomes aware of the discovery. Adolf Klaus, the German naval attaché and Abwehr agent in Huelva, receives word of a British officer washing ashore with classified documents. The race begins. The Spanish authorities have been most correct in their handling of this matter, reports Wilhelm Leistner, German agent in Spain, in a coded message to Berlin. They are following diplomatic protocol, but we have our channels. The Spanish government, officially neutral, but with strong ties to Nazi Germany, finds itself in a delicate position. Franco's regime owes Hitler for his support during the Spanish Civil War. Yet Spain cannot be seen openly violating the rights of a dead Allied officer. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service, personally orders his agents to obtain access to the documents by any means necessary. This could be the intelligence breakthrough we've been waiting for, he writes in a communique dated May 1st, 1943. The Spanish authorities placed Major Martin's body in cold storage at the local morgue. Dr. Eduardo del Torno, the Spanish pathologist who examines the body, notes in his report, "Death by drowning. Body shows signs, consistent with several days in water. Personal effects intact." What happens next is a masterclass in espionage tradecraft. Spanish officials, under pressure from German intelligence, agree to temporarily hold the briefcase and its contents. In reality, they allow Abwehr agents to carefully steam open the sealed documents, photograph them, and reseal them so perfectly that no tampering would be detected. May 8, 1943. The photographs arrive on Hitler's desk at the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. They reveal letters from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff, to General Sir Harold Alexander in Tunisia, discussing Allied plans for the invasion of Europe. The documents indicate that the Allies plan to invade Sardinia and Greece, with Sicily mentioned only as a diversion. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris presents the intelligence to Hitler personally. Mein Führer, this is the most significant intelligence coup of the year, he declares. We now know their Mediterranean strategy. Hitler studies the documents carefully. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel and General Alfred Jodl, Hitler's top military advisors, are summoned immediately. The Führer makes his decision: reinforce Sardinia and the Peloponnese. The British will not take us by surprise. In that moment, Operation Mincemeat achieves its objective. The corpse of a homeless Welsh man, transformed into the fictional Major William Martin, has successfully delivered false information directly to Adolf Hitler himself, setting in motion a massive redeployment of German forces away from the true Allied target, Sicily, April 30th, 1943. The Mediterranean waters off the coast of Huelva, Spain. A fisherman spots a waterlogged corpse washing against the shore, military uniform still clinging to bloated flesh, a locked briefcase chained to the wrist, documents inside that would change the course of World War II. What the fisherman couldn't know was that this body, this single, meticulously prepared corpse, was about to pull off one of the greatest military deceptions in history. And Adolf Hitler would fall for it completely. Hitler sat in his Wolf's Lair headquarters on May 12, 1943, as intelligence reports from Spain were laid before him. The Führer's piercing blue eyes scanned documents that appeared to reveal the Allies' most closely guarded secret, their next invasion target. The Mediterranean strategy that Hitler and the German High Command had been desperately trying to anticipate was seemingly exposed in black and white. General Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the Wehrmacht, stood rigidly as Hitler absorbed the implications. So, they planned to invade Greece and Sardinia. Hitler declared, tapping the intelligence summary with unusual certainty. Not Sicily. This moment marked Hitler's fatal mistake, a decision that would cost Germany the Mediterranean, hasten defeat in North Africa, and ultimately contribute to the Third Reich's downfall. Based on what appeared to be leaked Allied documents recovered from a British courier's body, Hitler ordered a massive redeployment of forces away from Sicily, the actual Allied target, to reinforce Greece and Sardinia against invasions that would never come. The scale of this redeployment was staggering. Within weeks, the 1st Panzer Division, with its 15,000 men, 150 tanks, and critical artillery support, was transferred from France to Greece. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division, one of Germany's elite fighting forces, received orders to split its strength between Sardinia and Sicily, critically weakening the island's defenses. Luftwaffe squadrons with over 160 aircraft were repositioned to Greek airfields. Naval mining operations intensified around Sardinia and the Peloponnese, while Sicily's approaches received reduced attention. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, recently recalled from North Africa, reportedly questioned the intelligence assessment during a heated military conference on May the 15th. The document seemed too convenient, he cautioned, too perfectly aligned with what we would hope to discover. His concerns were dismissed. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, expressed similar doubts, but was overruled by Hitler's conviction. The most telling statistic of Hitler's fatal error: by July 1943, German troop strength on Sicily had been reduced by approximately 35,000 men, forces that would have been crucial in repelling the coming Allied invasion. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, which might have made the difference between defeat and victory, sat idle in Greece, awaiting an attack that never materialized. Hitler's decision was based entirely on documents carried by a dead British officer who never existed, Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, created by British intelligence as part of Operation Mincemeat. The corpse that deceived Hitler had accomplished its mission with devastating effectiveness. As General Dwight D. Eisenhower would later write in his memoirs, the single most decisive factor in the Sicily campaign was the enemy's continued adherence to a completely false estimate of our intentions. April 28, 1943. Naval Intelligence Headquarters, London. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague stares at the naked corpse laid out before him. The body, a young man who had died from pneumonia, lies pale and still on a metal examination table. The room smells of formaldehyde and disinfectant. Outside, air raid sirens wail in the distance as London endures another night of the Blitz. "This man," Montague whispers to Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, standing beside him, "will save thousands of Allied lives. Operation Mincemeat, one of the most audacious deception operations of World War II, begins with a corpse. Not just any corpse, but one that would become the linchpin in a web of lies so convincing it would deceive Adolf Hitler himself and alter the course of the war in the Mediterranean." The idea had originated months earlier in the fertile mind of Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming, the same man who would later create James Bond. As part of the Naval Intelligence Division, Fleming had drafted a memo titled the Trout Memo in 1939, listing methods to deceive enemy intelligence, including a suggestion, not a very nice one, about planting false documents on a corpse that would wash ashore in enemy territory. By early 1943, this macabre suggestion had become Operation Mincemeat, overseen by the 20 Committee, named for the Roman numeral XX, or double cross. The strategic imperative was clear and urgent. Allied forces were preparing to invade Sicily in July 1943, but the island's obvious strategic position meant the Germans would expect this move. A successful invasion required convincing Hitler that the Allies were targeting Greece and Sardinia instead. The operation's architects, Montague and Cholmondeley, faced an extraordinary challenge, creating an entirely believable identity for their dead courier. They needed not just a name, but a life, complete with personal letters, theater ticket stubs, and the mundane debris that accumulates in a real person's pockets. They selected the name Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. According to official records from the operation, recently declassified in 1996, the corpse itself was that of Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welsh laborer who had died after ingesting rat poison, either by suicide or accident. His body had been kept in cold storage until the operation commenced. Montague later wrote in his memoir, Operation Mincemeat, "We set about providing Bill with a complete identity and personality. He must appear to be carrying papers so important that he would never have been allowed to fly, yet not so important that he would have gone in a warship." The team meticulously crafted Martin's identity, creating love letters from a fictional fiancée named Pam, an angry letter from his bank manager about an overdraft, receipts for an engagement ring, theater ticket stubs, keys, cigarettes, and even placing a St. Christopher medal around his neck, a gift from his beloved. Most crucially, they equipped Major Martin with seemingly top-secret documents, a personal letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of Imperial General Staff, to General Sir Harold Alexander in Tunisia, which casually mentioned plans for Allied landings in Greece and Sardinia, with Sicily mentioned only as a diversionary target. As Cholmondeley examined the fabricated identity cards and letters, he remarked, "Every man leaves behind him a trail of documents from birth to death. We must create that trail." The corpse that would deceive Hitler was almost ready. Operation Mincemeat was about to begin, April 19, 1943. The Mediterranean Sea off the Spanish coast. In the pre-dawn darkness, the British submarine HMS Seraph surfaces silently. Lieutenant Commander Norman Jewell stands on the conning tower, scanning the horizon for enemy vessels. The submarine carries an unusual cargo, a metal canister containing the body of a man who never lived, but would soon die for his country. Operation Mincemeat, one of the most audacious deception operations of World War II, has entered its most critical phase. The preparation had been meticulous. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, the naval intelligence officer who masterminded the operation alongside Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley, had overseen every detail. The corpse, that of Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welsh man who had died from rat poison, had been transformed into the fictional Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. In Montague's own words from his post-war memoir, "The Man Who Never Was," we had created a man who had never existed, given him a complete identity and background, and were about to deliver him into enemy hands. At 4:30 a.m., the crew of HMS Seraph brings the canister to the deck. The atmosphere is solemn. These men, hardened by years of war, handle their macabre cargo with unexpected reverence. Captain Jewell reads from the Book of Psalms, the only funeral service Major Martin would ever receive. The body, dressed in the uniform of a Royal Marine officer, complete with identification, personal letters, theater ticket stubs, and the crucial classified documents, is carefully prepared. Scene cue. In the dim light, sailors gently lower a canvas-wrapped figure into the dark waters. At precisely 4:45 a.m., the body is released into the sea just off the coast of Huelva, Spain, carefully chosen for its known German intelligence presence and favorable currents that would carry the corpse to shore. Lieutenant David Scott, one of the few officers privy to the operation's true nature, later recalled, "There was something deeply unsettling about watching a man we had come to know so well, though he never existed, drift away into the darkness." The corpse carries a briefcase, chained to his wrist, containing letters signed by military leaders, including General Sir Archibald Nye, Vice Chief of the Imperial General Staff. These documents suggest the Allies plan to invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily, the actual target. The deception is layered with convincing details. Love letters from a fictional fiancé, a stern letter from his bank regarding an overdraft of 79 notes, 19 tustu, equivalent to approximately $3,500 today, and even the stub of a theater ticket. As HMS Seraph submerges, disappearing beneath the waves, the fate of Operation Mincemeat and potentially thousands of Allied lives now rests with a dead man and the Spanish currents. Montague later wrote, "We had done all we could. The rest was in the hands of fate and the enemy." The statistics were sobering. The planned invasion of Sicily would involve 160,000 men, 14,000 vehicles, 600 tanks, and 1,800 artillery pieces. Without successful deception, military planners estimated casualties could exceed 10,000 in the first wave alone. The corpse of one homeless man might save divisions of soldiers if the Germans took the bait. As dawn breaks over the Spanish coast, the body of Major Martin drifts toward shore, carrying secrets that never existed toward enemies eager to discover them. The most audacious deception of the war had been launched. Now, the waiting would begin. April 30th, 1943. Inside the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia, Adolf Hitler studies the intelligence reports with intense concentration. The Führer's pale fingers trace across maps of the Mediterranean as he absorbs the shocking news. Allied documents recovered from a British officer's body have revealed their invasion plans. The Mediterranean strategy that Hitler and the German High Command have debated for months suddenly crystallizes before him. Sicily, the obvious target that many German generals had predicted, is merely a feint. The real blow will come against Sardinia and Greece. "This is exactly what I have been saying all along," Hitler declares to his assembled generals. The room falls silent as he slams his fist on the oak table. The British and Americans are too clever to attempt Sicily. It is too obvious. General Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the Wehrmacht, studies his Führer's face carefully. Hitler appears utterly convinced by the recovered documents. A briefcase containing letters to generals, bank statements, and identity cards belonging to Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, whose body had washed ashore near Huelva, Spain, on April 30th. "My Führer," Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel ventures cautiously, "some of our intelligence officers have expressed concerns about—" "Nonsense," Hitler interrupts. "The Spanish have photographed these documents. They are authentic." The officer was carrying letters from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Alexander in North Africa. The plans are unmistakable. The fateful decision is made. Hitler orders the immediate reinforcement of Sardinia and Greece. The elite 1st Panzer Division is diverted from the Eastern Front, where it is desperately needed against the Soviets, and sent to Greece. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division, one of Germany's most formidable fighting units, is dispatched to Sardinia, along with the veteran 90th Panzer Grenadier Division. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, receives these orders with private skepticism. His agents have raised questions about the British officer's identity, but Hitler has already committed. The Führer, once convinced of something, rarely changes his mind. In Berlin, Joseph Goebbels notes in his diary on May the 12th, 1943, the Führer is absolutely certain the Allied invasion will avoid Sicily. The documents recovered from the British officer are considered definitive. What Hitler doesn't know, what he cannot possibly imagine, is that Major William Martin never existed. The body that washed ashore in Spain was actually that of Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welsh laborer who had died from rat poison. The elaborate fiction had been crafted by British intelligence in an operation codenamed Mincemeat. The Germans have intercepted what appears to be the most valuable intelligence coup of the Mediterranean campaign. In reality, they have fallen victim to one of the most audacious deceptions in military history. As Hitler redirects his forces away from Sicily, Allied planners in London receive the confirmation they've been waiting for. German signals intelligence, decoded through Ultra, reveals that Operation Mincemeat has succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The Mediterranean theater has been reshaped by a dead man carrying false papers. The stage is now set for the true Allied invasion, Operation Husky, the assault on Sicily that will begin the collapse of fascist Italy and open the soft underbelly of Hitler's fortress Europe. July 10th, 1943. Operation Husky begins. The largest amphibious invasion force in history, 2,590 vessels carrying over 160,000 Allied troops, crashes against Sicily's southern shores. German General Hans Valentin Hubel stands shocked at the invasion point, his panzer divisions positioned fatally far from the landing beaches. The Mediterranean night blazes with naval gunfire as Allied forces secure their beachheads with surprising ease. In Berlin, Hitler's fury erupts as he realizes the terrible truth. He has been deceived by a dead man. The success of Operation Mincemeat now reveals itself in blood and fire across Sicily's landscape. Lieutenant General George Patton's 7th Army drives northward toward Messina with shocking speed, while General Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army secures the eastern flank. Axis forces, having committed their reserves to Sardinia and Greece, precisely as the British planners had hoped, scramble desperately to contain the Allied advance. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, German Commander-in-Chief South, dispatches urgent communiques to Berlin. Enemy landings far exceed expected scope. Reinforcements required immediately. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, receiving reports of the invasion's progress, allows himself a rare moment of satisfaction. In a confidential memo to the War Cabinet dated July 12, 1943, he writes, "The deception has been complete. The enemy was looking the other way when we struck. This is no small achievement. The human cost of Operation Husky unfolds in stark statistics. 23,000 Allied casualties over 38 days of fighting. Yet military historians now estimate that without Operation Mincemeat's successful deception, these figures might have doubled or tripled. Captain Ewan Montague, sitting in Naval Intelligence Headquarters in London, receives confirmation after confirmation that the Germans had indeed swallowed Major Martin's false documents whole. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel had personally ordered reinforcements to Sardinia and Greece, leaving Sicily vulnerable. Scene Q. A map of Sicily with Allied forces sweeping across it, intercut with German intelligence reports citing Major Martin's documents. By July 22nd, Palermo falls to American forces. German resistance stiffens in the mountainous northeast, but the outcome is inevitable. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, faces increasing scrutiny for the intelligence failure. In his diary, later recovered after the war, he writes, "The British deception was masterful. We were looking where they wanted us to look, while they struck elsewhere. This may well prove a turning point." As Allied forces press toward Messina, Hitler finally acknowledges the strategic disaster. In a Führer conference on July 25, 1943, transcripts reveal his bitter assessment. The Mediterranean theater has become untenable. We must prepare for Italy's collapse. The same day, the Italian Grand Council votes to depose Mussolini, a direct consequence of Sicily's imminent fall. On August 17, 1943, the last German troops evacuate Sicily, crossing the Strait of Messina to the Italian mainland. Operation Husky concludes in complete Allied victory. In London, the architects of Operation Mincemeat, Montague, Cholmondeley, and Fleming, receive classified commendations. Their corpse, their fiction, their daring gamble had helped secure a foothold in Fortress Europe that would never be relinquished. But the greatest vindication comes in a captured German intelligence assessment dated August 1943. The documents found on the British courier were, in retrospect, the most successful enemy deception encountered in this war. Hitler's intuition had been correct, but he had been overruled by the apparent authenticity of papers carried by a dead Welsh vagrant who had posthumously changed the course of World War II, January 1943. London. In a dimly lit basement room of the British Admiralty, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague hunches over a desk strewn with documents. His fingers, stained with ink, carefully craft the identity of a man who never existed. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and tension. In this moment, one of the most audacious deception operations of World War II is taking shape. An operation that would save thousands of Allied lives by convincing Hitler of a lie. Operation Mincemeat begins with creating a ghost. The task facing Montague and his colleague, Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley of MI5, was unprecedented. To create an identity so convincing it would fool the entire German intelligence apparatus. They needed more than just a name. They needed a man with a past, a personality, a life that would withstand the ruthless scrutiny of Nazi intelligence officers. The corpse they would use was merely a vessel. It was the identity that would make or break the deception. A man who never was, Montague would later call him in his memoir. Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, a name chosen for its ordinariness, its unremarkable Englishness, would be their creation. But who was William Martin to be? What life story would convince the enemy of his authenticity? Montague and Cholmondeley worked methodically, building layer upon layer of identity. They started with military identification cards, carefully aged to show where. They added personal letters, theater ticket stubs, and keys. Each item told a story. Each detail reinforced the illusion. Major Martin needed to be important enough to carry sensitive documents, yet not so high-ranking as to raise suspicion about why he was traveling by plane. The most poignant elements of Martin's identity were the most personal. A photograph of a fictional fiancée named Pam was obtained from an MI5 clerk named Jean Leslie. Love letters, scented with perfume, were written in Jean's hand. A jeweler's receipt for an engagement ring. A stern letter from Martin's father. An overdrawn bank notice. A bill from his club. Even the stub of a candle from a restaurant dinner. The hardest part, Cholmondeley later recalled, was creating the worn wallet effect. The team passed items around, keeping them in their pockets for days to achieve the right level of wear. Nothing could appear too new, too pristine. The Germans would notice. By February 1943, Major William Martin had become more real than many living men. His personality emerged through the artifacts, slightly careless with money, deeply in love with his fiancée, brave but not reckless. The team even gave him a nickname that appeared in casual correspondence. Bill. In the final stage of identity creation, they attached an ID card to the body that would eventually carry these items. The photos showed a young Royal Marine officer, actually a staff member who resembled the deceased man who would become Martin. The card was deliberately soaked in water and partially dried to simulate what would happen when a body was recovered from the sea. As Montague sealed the last document into its waterproof container, he knew that thousands of lives hung in the balance. The success of the Allied invasion of Sicily, and perhaps the course of the war itself, would depend on whether the Germans believed in the existence of Major William Martin, a man conjured from paper, ink, and the desperate ingenuity of wartime intelligence. April 19th, 1943. HMS Seraph surfaces in the cold, dark waters off the Spanish coast. Lieutenant Norman Jewell stands on the conning tower, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. The salt spray stings his face as he contemplates the bizarre cargo his submarine carries, a dead body that might change the course of the war. Operation Mincemeat, perhaps the most audacious deception of World War II, has begun its most critical phase. Below deck, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague and Charles Cholmondeley's months of meticulous planning culminate in this moment. The corpse, officially designated as Major William Martin, Royal Marines, lies in a special container packed with dry ice. In reality, he is Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman who died from rat poison, his body claimed from a London morgue. The transformation from anonymous civilian to fictional officer represents the pinnacle of British intelligence craftsmanship. Jewell orders the submarine to periscope depth. "Prepare the package," he commands. In the cramped confines below, Royal Navy personnel don rubber gloves. They remove the corpse from refrigeration and dress it in the waterproof Royal Marines uniform previously prepared by intelligence officers in London. Into the pockets go the carefully crafted items, theater ticket stubs, keys, cigarettes, and most importantly, the letters. One from Major Martin's fiancée, Pam, and another, appearing official but deliberately casual, from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander in North Africa, containing false information about Allied invasion plans. A Mae West life jacket is fitted to the body. The briefcase, containing documents suggesting the Allies' plan to invade Greece and Sardinia rather than Sicily, is chained to the corpse's belt. This is the culmination of Operation Mincemeat's elaborate fiction, a dead man carrying secrets that never existed. At 0430 hours, Lieutenant Jewell gives the final order. The submarine surfaces fully, in near total darkness, with only the faintest moonlight reflecting off the water. 4 sailors carry the body to the deck. A rubber dinghy is prepared to transport Major Martin closer to shore. Treat him gently, Jewell instructs. Remember, he's one of our own. The words carry weight beyond their immediate context. This unknown man is indeed serving his country in death as he never could in life. As dawn approaches, the body is released into the cold Mediterranean waters. Lieutenant Jewell reads the 39th Psalm over the corpse, an unplanned but fitting tribute. The submarine crew watches silently as currents catch the dead man, carrying him toward the Spanish coastline, where German intelligence eagerly awaits any scrap of Allied information. The most audacious deception of World War II is now in motion, its success or failure entirely dependent on how convincingly a dead Welsh vagrant can play the role of a Royal Marines officer. Scene cue. The camera slowly pans away from the floating body, revealing the submarine silently submerging into the dark waters, leaving Major Martin to complete his mission alone. April 30th, 1943. Berlin, Führerbunker. Adolf Hitler hunches over a detailed map of the Mediterranean, his trembling hand tracing the coastlines of Sicily and Greece. General Alfred Jodl and Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel stand rigid nearby, watching their Führer's face contort with calculation. The intelligence report before them contains photographs of identification papers, personal letters, and military documents recovered from a British officer's corpse that washed ashore near Huelva, Spain. This confirms what we already suspected, Hitler declares, tapping his finger on Greece. The Allied invasion will come in the Balkans, not Sicily. The corpse of Major William Martin had completed its mission. Hitler had swallowed the elaborate British deception, hook, line, and sinker. Operation Mincemeat's architects in London would have smiled with grim satisfaction had they witnessed this moment. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague of Naval Intelligence and RAF Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley had engineered a masterpiece of wartime deception that was now reaching its culmination. Their fictional Major Martin, in reality, the body of Glendower Michael, a homeless Welsh man who had died from rat poison, had successfully infiltrated the highest echelons of Nazi leadership. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, had personally vouched for the authenticity of the documents found on the corpse. The materials appear genuine in every respect, he reported to Hitler. The personal effects, the theater tickets, the letters from his fiancée, these are not details our enemies would think to falsify. The deception's impact was immediate and devastating. Hitler issued Führer Directive No. 48 on May 4, 1943, ordering the reinforcement of the Balkans. The 1st Panzer Division was diverted from France to Greece. The Luftwaffe's Jagdgeschwader 53 Fighter Wing redeployed from Sicily to the Aegean. Over 90,000 German troops were repositioned to defend against an invasion that would never come. General Kurt Student, who had commanded the successful airborne invasion of Crete in 1941, was tasked with preparing anti-airborne defenses in Greece. We must not allow another Crete to happen, this time with us as the victims, Hitler insisted. In perhaps the most telling statistic of Operation Mincemeat's success, German forces in Sicily were reduced from 40,000 to barely 30,000 troops as resources flowed eastward. The island's defenses were critically weakened just weeks before the actual Allied invasion would begin, as documented in Admiral Karl Dönitz's war diary entry of May 12, 1943. The Führer is convinced the main Allied thrust will come through Greece and the eastern Mediterranean. Preparations must be made accordingly. Scene Q. Hitler's finger traces a path from North Africa to Greece, completely bypassing Sicily, the actual Allied target, as his generals exchange knowing glances, believing they've uncovered the enemy's secret plans. The corpse of a homeless man had accomplished what armies could not. It had penetrated Hitler's mind and manipulated his strategic thinking at a pivotal moment in the war. A single body had shifted entire divisions. One elaborate lie had overwhelmed years of military intelligence, and in doing so, it had sealed the fate of Axis forces in the Mediterranean. But as Hitler redirected his forces eastward, the real Allied invasion force was already assembling in North Africa, their sights set firmly on Sicily. The Führer's fatal miscalculation was about to be revealed in blood and fire, July 10, 1943. Sicily. As Allied forces storm the beaches under Operation Husky, German defenders stand bewildered, their forces concentrated in the wrong locations. Thousands of Wehrmacht soldiers wait vigilantly on Sardinia and Greece for an invasion that will never come. Meanwhile, Sicily falls in just 38 days. The reason? A waterlogged corpse that washed ashore on a Spanish beach 3 months earlier had completely deceived Adolf Hitler and the entire German High Command. Operation Mincemeat represented the pinnacle of Allied deception warfare. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague of British Naval Intelligence and RAF Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley had orchestrated what historian Ben McIntyre would later call the most successful wartime deception ever attempted. Their audacious plan had not only succeeded, but had saved an estimated 40,000 Allied lives by diverting German defensive resources away from the actual invasion target. The strategic implications were immense. With Sicily secured by August 17, 1943, the Allies gained a crucial foothold for the invasion of mainland Italy. German Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, who had been deceived by the false documents, was forced to hastily redeploy his forces. In his post-war interrogation, Kesselring admitted that single deception operation altered our entire defensive posture in the Mediterranean. The triumph of Operation Mincemeat extended beyond Sicily. The successful invasion accelerated the collapse of Mussolini's fascist regime, with the Italian dictator deposed on July 25, 1943, after just 2 weeks of fighting. Italy's subsequent surrender on September 8, 1943, forced Hitler to divert 16 divisions, approximately 250,000 men, from other fronts to occupy his former ally. This critical redeployment weakened German positions on both the Eastern Front against the Soviets and in France, where the Allies would land the following year. In London, Winston Churchill recognized the operation's pivotal importance. In a classified memo dated August 20, 1943, he wrote, "By the use of a corpse and a courier's bag, we have won a province of 10,000 square miles, at a cost far below what conventional warfare would have required." For Adolf Hitler, the deception represented a devastating intelligence failure. According to Albert Speer's post-war memoirs, Hitler became increasingly paranoid after Operation Mincemeat, suspecting deception in every piece of intelligence. After the Sicily affair, Speer wrote, Hitler would sometimes refuse to believe authentic intelligence reports, convinced they were plants. This paranoia would later contribute to Hitler's disastrous decision to ignore warnings about the actual D-Day landings in Normandy in June 1944. Perhaps most remarkably, the operation's success hinged entirely on the body of a single Welsh vagrant, Glyndwr Michael, who had died from rat poison. In death, this homeless man accomplished what armies could not. He deceived Hitler, changed the course of the Mediterranean campaign, accelerated the fall of fascist Italy, and potentially shortened World War II by months, saving countless lives in the process. Scene cue. Camera pans across Sicily's beaches, now quiet, as a narrator solemnly intones the casualty figures that might have been without Operation Mincemeat's success. But the triumph of the dead man's deception was just beginning to ripple through history, altering the war's trajectory in ways even its architects could never have fully anticipated. July 10th, 1943. Sicily. As Allied forces storm the beaches of Operation Husky, the corpse of Major William Martin completes its final mission from beyond the grave. The deception that began with a cadaver in the cold waters of Huelva has now culminated in Hitler's most catastrophic strategic blunder in the Mediterranean theater. Operation Mincemeat, perhaps the most audacious deception in military history, has achieved what no living soldier could. It has fooled the Führer himself. The enemy has spread an obvious smokescreen. Hitler had declared in May 1943, convinced that Greece, not Sicily, would be the Allied target. Even as reconnaissance showed massive buildups near Sicily, the German High Command remained fixated on the Balkans. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was dispatched to Greece. The 1st Panzer Division was diverted to the region. Valuable Luftwaffe squadrons were repositioned away from Sicily, all because of documents carried by a dead man who never existed. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, standing in Naval Intelligence Headquarters in London, receives the confirmation telegram with trembling hands. Mincemeat swallowed whole, it reads. The architect of the deception allows himself a rare smile. His creation, the elaborate false identity of Captain, acting Major, William Martin of the Royal Marines, has accomplished the unthinkable. The fictional life he and Charles Cholmondeley had crafted down to the theater ticket stubs and love letters has saved thousands of real lives. The numbers tell the story of Mincemeat's triumph. Sicily falls in just 38 days instead of the projected 90. Allied casualties number 24,850. Terrible, but far below the 90,000 feared if German defenses had been properly positioned. The 7th Army under General George Patton advances rapidly through western Sicily, facing minimal resistance where German units should have been waiting. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler rages at his intelligence services. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence, has failed him catastrophically. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, falls further from Hitler's favor, a development that will eventually lead to his execution in April 1945 for his connections to the German resistance. The ripples of Mincemeat extend far beyond Sicily. Scene cue. Documents scattered across a Situation Room table as German officers argue, while a map of Greece is prominently displayed. The corpse that had once been a homeless Welsh man named Glyndwr Michael, whose body had been claimed from a London morgue by intelligence officers, has altered the course of the war. In death, this forgotten man accomplished what battalions could not. As historian Ben McIntyre would later write, Glyndwr Michael, friendless in life, had been transformed in death into the most effective spy in history. The legacy of Operation Mincemeat extends beyond Sicily. It becomes a template for future deceptions, including Operation Fortitude, that would protect the D-Day landings in 1944. The lesson was clear. In modern warfare, deception could be as powerful as divisions. As Sicily falls to Allied forces, the corpse of Major Martin lies in its grave in Huelva, Spain, his headstone bearing the name of a man who never lived, but whose impact on history was immeasurable. The Spanish cemetery keeper still places fresh flowers on the grave, unaware that the body below belongs not to a distinguished British officer, but to a Welsh drifter who became, in death, one of World War II's most consequential soldiers. But what would happen to the secret of mincemeat and the true identity of the man who fooled Hitler? That revelation would have to wait for decades, as the greatest deception operation of the war faded into the classified shadows of history. April 1943, London, England. In a dimly lit basement office of the British Naval Intelligence Division, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague stares at a photograph of a Spanish morgue. His fingers, stained with cigarette smoke, trace the outline of a face, the face of a man who would soon become the most important corpse in the history of modern warfare. "We needed a dead man to win a war," Montague would later write. Behind this macabre scheme stood not generals with medals, but a handful of intelligence officers whose imagination would save thousands of Allied lives. The architects of Operation Mincemeat formed an unlikely collection of minds. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, a 42-year-old Jewish barrister in peacetime, possessed the legal mind necessary to anticipate every contingency. His meticulous attention to detail would prove crucial. A single inconsistency in their deception could unravel everything. Alongside him worked Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley of MI5, a tall, gangly man with an eccentric mustache and a mind that specialized in the fantastical. It was Cholmondeley who first proposed using a corpse to carry false documents, expanding on an idea mentioned in the Trout Memo written by Rear Admiral John Godfrey and his assistant, a young intelligence officer named Ian Fleming, the future creator of James Bond. Behind these principal architects stood a shadow network of specialists. There was Sir Bernard Spilsbury, Britain's foremost pathologist, who advised on how to preserve the body. Jean Leslie, a young MI5 clerk who provided a photograph of herself to serve as the fictional fiancée, Pam. Bentley Purchase, the coroner who helped procure the suitable corpse. Each played their role in an elaborate theatrical production, where the stakes were measured in human lives. Scene cue, camera pans across a table covered with identity cards, letters, theater ticket stubs, and personal effects. The manufactured life of a man who never existed. The psychological intuition of these men proved remarkable, as Montague later reflected in his memoir, The Man Who Never Was. We were not merely trying to deceive the enemy about our military intentions. We were creating a man, building his character, giving him habits, weaknesses, a voice that would speak from beyond the grave. They understood that the German intelligence officers would scrutinize not just the official documents, but the human details. A love letter here, a stern note from a bank manager there. These were the touches that transformed a corpse into Major William Martin. Their success required an understanding of human psychology that went beyond military strategy. Montagu knew that the Germans would be suspicious of the documents that were too easily found. If the Germans thought we were trying to plant information, he noted, they would believe the opposite of what we told them. The deception had to appear accidental, the secrets carelessly carried. Behind the brilliance of Operation Mincemeat lay something more profound, the willingness to think beyond conventional warfare. As Admiral John Godfrey had written in the original Trout memo, the Germans are fond of scientific methods and would be taken in by a project of this kind, which contained apparently genuine scientific data. These men understood their enemy's psychology, their methodical approach to intelligence, and exploited it masterfully, but what they would set in motion next would change the course of the war in ways even they could scarcely imagine. 75 years after Operation Mincemeat concluded, the weathered headstone in a cemetery in Huelva, Spain, still reads, William Martin, Royal Marines, born on 29 March 1907, died 24 April 1943, beloved son of John Glendwere Martin and the late Antonia Martin of Cardiff, Wales. Dulce et decorum est pro patria more. The Latin inscription, sweet and fitting it is to die for one's country, carries a profound irony. For the man buried beneath never lived, never served, and never died for his country, at least not in the conventional sense. The corpse that deceived Hitler, Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, was, in reality, Glendwere Michael, a homeless Welsh laborer who died after consuming rat poison laced with phosphorus. In death, this forgotten man accomplished what thousands of living soldiers could not. He changed the course of World War II by convincing Hitler to redirect his forces away from Sicily, saving countless Allied lives. The man who never was, as Ewan Montagu titled his 1953 memoir of the operation, has cast a long shadow over military intelligence. Admiral John Godfrey, the director of naval intelligence, who first championed the deception plan, later reflected, sometimes the wildest ideas carry the day. Operation Mincemeat reminds us that imagination remains the most potent weapon in any arsenal. The operation's success fundamentally transformed military deception doctrine. Lieutenant Commander Charles Cholmondeley of MI5's Section B1A and Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montagu of Naval Intelligence Division created not just a false document trail, but an entire fictional life, complete with theater ticket stubs, love letters, and overdue bills. Their attention to the mundane details of human existence proved more convincing than any elaborate fabrication. By 1944, the Allies had created an entire phantom army, the first United States Army Group, or FUSAG, under General George Patton, using the lessons from Operation Mincemeat. This ghost force, existing only in falsified radio traffic and rubber tanks, convinced German high command that the D-Day landings would occur at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Winston Churchill, who personally approved Operation Mincemeat, later wrote, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." This philosophy became doctrine. Between 1943 and 1945, the Allied A-Force Deception Unit under Colonel Dudley Clark conducted over 20 major strategic deceptions across the Mediterranean theater. Perhaps most remarkably, the full truth of Operation Mincemeat remained classified until 1996, over 50 years after the war ended. The identity of the body was the final secret to be revealed. Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the renowned forensic pathologist who helped prepare the corpse, took that knowledge to his grave in 1947. In the cold calculations of war, 30,000 Allied casualties were predicted for the Sicily invasion. The actual number was 7,000. This 23,000 life difference, a population larger than many small towns, represents the human legacy of a single corpse and a briefcase of false documents. Today, in an age of satellite surveillance and cyber warfare, the lesson of Operation Mincemeat endures. Human psychology remains the ultimate vulnerability. As Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, Naval Commander-in-Chief for the Sicily landings, noted in his final report, the willingness of the enemy to believe what he wants to believe is his greatest weakness. The corpse that deceived Hitler reminds us that in the theater of war, sometimes the most powerful actor is one who never truly existed at all.